Veronica presents the AI Repertory Theatre's production of New World Papers, Book 1, The Historian's Tale, by K.B. Shaw. We pledge our lives to the service of today and the building of tomorrow. The Code. Chapter 1. Dangerous. The treason of these papers is not just in the actions they document, but in their very existence.
It began with the spy in the tree. It was a clear, crisp dawn in early spring. I was cleaning Headmaster Hunninger's office, a large, wood-paneled room on the second floor of the Mount, a boys' school near Agresita. The air was stale and filled with drifting motes of dust, so I decided to open the balcony doors to let in a fresh breeze. The headmaster's balcony looked westward over the Mount's courtyard. Sol Minor had been up for almost 2 hours, and Sol Major was just rising. The giant chestnut tree that grew outside the courtyard's western wall was silhouetted against the indigo-hued sky. As I opened the doors, I caught some movement among the black jumble of still sparse leaves. It could have been nothing, or an animal, or a person. I couldn't be certain, but I suspected it was a spy. To stop and stare would only let the spy know I saw him. So I looked but a moment, then went about my duties. I only needed a moment because of my secret talent. Actually, I have 2 talents. The first is a knack for remembering everything I've seen or heard since my 10th cycle, when I was in my 15th annum. I kept this talent secret. Only the head of staff, Missy Howard, knew of my second talent, my ability to draw. Not only can I visualize any moment in my life from the last 2 cycles, I can also sketch every detail of that moment. I hoped these talents would be the key to my escape from the tedium of the Mount. So, as I cleaned the office, I stole glances at the tree with the intention of doing some drawings. If my plans worked out, I would expose the spy in the tree. Now, I have nothing against spies. Young men like me, young men without families, are sometimes bought by one powerful franchise or guild family or another and placed on a rival's house staff to spy. I was unsure of this spy's purpose, but the first sons from many franchise families boarded and studied at the Mount. So the spy in the tree was probably employed by a rival franchise school, one of the guilds or a guild school, perhaps even the council. In fact, I often thought about becoming a guild spy myself. As a servant, I was as invisible to the students and most of the faculty as the spy in the tree. With my hidden talents and my access to all these privileged prigs, I can make a small fortune selling what I knew of their secrets, personal fears, and private perversions. Or maybe I could spy for a franchise family at a guild school. However, for all my bluster and bravado, my life at the Mount was all I knew, and although I desired change, I was afraid of leaving. When I finished cleaning, I took one last look at the tree as I closed the balcony doors. I am, a no-contract foundling. In New World, reproductive contracts are handed down from parent to child. Each citizen is allowed to reproduce him or herself. Apparently both of my parents had already used their contracts, or perhaps I was outright abandoned. Either way, I didn't inherit a contract and I wasn't a citizen. I was a ward of the state. The council placed me at the Mount to be raised from infancy through my coming of age. Until my 18th annum, I would be in service to and property of the Mount. Except for a few day trips to nearby Agresita, I have lived my entire life within sight of the Mount's walls. The code requires that all males be stemmed in their 10th cycle when they reached 15 annums. Stemming can be reversed when a man enters a reproductive contract, a man with citizenship, that is. Curiously, my stemming was the first event in my life that I remember in clear and precise detail. It seemed unnecessary since my contact with females was limited to some older women on the house staff. My visits to Agresita were so supervised that I barely had a moment to look at the town girls. At the time of the events in these papers, I was in my 17th annum. 2 weeks after high conjunction, I'd be 18 and a free man. A man with no rights, to be sure, but free, with at least the possibility of becoming a citizen and having the right to earn or buy a reproductive contract. I exited the headmaster's office through the servants' panel and scurried like a squirrel along the narrow serving passages that ran between the walls of the school. The serving staff were like cones, The students and faculty knew we were there, but we were seldom seen. We were all on a strict schedule that ensured rooms were empty when they needed servicing. The house staff was so proficient and the schedule so precise, we rarely ran into each other, much less one of the boys. Our only regular contact with students was when we served meals in the Great Hall, and our only time together was when we ate in the basement kitchen. I decided I had time to do a few sketches before the breakfast service, so I ascended 4 flights to my room. Missy Howard was new to the Mount when she found me drawing in the dirt with a stick. She must have been just 16 or 17 annums at the time. I must have been 5 or 6. It was before I got my memory talent, so I don't recall precisely. I do remember her long auburn hair, her friendly smile, and how she smelled of lavender. She was the one who told me stories of intrigue among the franchise and guild families, of rivalries and spies.
Now, drawing is a talent you can trade on when you're older, Fallon,
She said.
It's a talent that could buy you citizenship. It's a talent fit for a spy, so you best not let anyone know about it for now.
Over the cycles, she brought me paper and pencils and encouraged me to draw in secret. Although nobody but Missy Howard ever came to my room, I kept my drawings and supplies hidden in a box under my bed. I slid it out, opened it, and rifled through its contents until I found several blank sheets of thin paper. Taking a pencil in hand, I closed my eyes, visualized the moment I first noticed movement in the tree, opened them, and began to draw quickly. I repeated the process for each glance I had taken. My window faced east, toward the rising sol. I fastened the first drawing to the window with some tape and examined the dark patch that I thought was the spy. It was tight against the tree's trunk on the lowest level of branches. Then I positioned the second drawing over the first so I could compare the positions of the dark patch in each. It had moved to a higher branch and took on the appearance of a standing figure. The third drawing showed the figure crouching on a yet higher branch, and, in the fourth, the figure was sitting with his feet dangling. I smiled with satisfaction. I had discovered a spy. 2 weeks later, I asked Missy Howard to my room with the intention of revealing my most secret talent. She was now about 30 annums and had risen to assistant head of staff, but her smile remained warm and she still smelled of lavender. I began by telling her about the spy as she was examining my layered drawings, which I had again taped in place against the window.
How did you draw these?
From memory.
And how long did you examine the tree for each drawing?
No more than a second each.
4 images, from so short a time, from memory. How accurate are they?
Very. She studied the progression of the form in the tree.
It's probably just a child playing.
But he's been up there every day of the week for the past 2 weeks. A kid from town would be in school.
And you're just telling me now?
Like you said, Missy, it could have been a child playing. She considered the possibilities for a moment.
So what if it is a spy? That's no business of ours now, is it? Let the powers that be have their little intrigues. Don't mention the spy to Dean Ambrose. And don't make any more of these sketches, understand? It could be dangerous.
The leaves are too thick to see anything now anyway.
You know exactly what I mean.
She gave me a stern look.
I'll burn these.
She said, rolling up my drawings and sliding them into a deep pocket.
And we won't talk of it again.
The second week of 8th month was hot and humid, as it often is in the middle of red nights. The franchisers were still on summer break, and the faculty and most of the staff were home or off on holiday. I had retired to my room for the evening when I heard the clopping of hooves and the rattle of wheels on the drive. I arose from my bed and went to the window. Sol Major cast long shadows as it set in the west, while Sol Minor radiated a reddish glow as it rose in the east. It was the headmaster's carriage, so I quickly dressed and hurried down to greet him at the front door. Missy Howard, Dean Ambrose, and I reached the front hall at the same time.
Do you know what this is about, Dean?
Asked Missy Howard. Even in this heat, Dean Ambrose was dressed in his usual black frock coat and starched white collar, with slick gray hair trimmed in the tonsure style of academics. He dabbed a handkerchief at the sweat beading on his brow, then adjusted the pince-nez low on his pointed nose.
I have no idea. The headmaster is supposed to be on holiday in Primacita.
He gestured for me to open the door. The headmaster, a short, portly man with piggish features, rushed through and walked briskly toward the grand staircase. Ambrose and Missy Howard trailed in his wake. I closed the door and followed.
"Guests will arrive within the hour,
Said Hunninger as he swept up the staircase.
lest they will meet in the great hall and must not be disturbed."
Who will greet them at the...
Said Ambrose.
"I will, alone. I want all of you in your rooms before they arrive. That means you, too, Ambrose.
He waved us away.
Be off now."
I returned to my room, snuffed the candle, then positioned myself far enough from the window so my face couldn't be seen from outside. The first carriage arrived within the hour, the others shortly after. The main part of the Great Hall was on the first floor, which meant I couldn't hear anything that was about to happen. That was unacceptable. 4 servant panels opened into the Great Hall, 2 on the main floor and 1 on each balcony at the ends of the hall. I donned dark clothes before heading down the passages in my stocking feet. I knew those passages so well that I didn't need a candle to find my way to the west panel on the upper level. The panel was in a dark recess between shelves, but I opened it slowly just to be safe. The gas lamps weren't lit, and the tall windows on the north wall to my left were shuttered. I could hear the scrape of chairs on the stone floor and whispers in the darkness. I got on my belly and crawled to the balustrade where I would have a clear view of what was going on. Suddenly, a match was struck and a directional lamp lit, its beam directed toward the south hall doors. I was distracted by a glint of light directly across from me. I glanced up just in time to see Dean Ambrose drop into a crouch behind the east balcony's balustrade, then prostrate himself just as I had. The hall doors swung open, illuminating 3 men. The 2 on the outside wore long dark coats and wide-brimmed hats. One was thin and tall, the other was a bit shorter and stout. The third man, small in stature, was in grimy, sweat-soaked undergarments with a black bag over his head. His hands were bound in front of him. The dark men had the other firmly in their grip.
"Bring the prisoner forward,"
Came a deep voice from the darkness behind the lamp. Prisoner? I had never heard the word before. As soon as the men stepped into the room, the doors slammed shut. The dark men dragged the prisoner to a spot barely 1.5 meters in front of the lamp and tore the bag from his head. I swallowed a gasp and instinctively edged back from the railing. His eyes were darkened, one swollen shut. His nose was pushed to the side and caked with dried blood. His lips were cracked and bloody. The dark men took up positions a half step back.
"Are you Vernon McCrae?"
It was the deep voice I'd heard earlier. The bloodied man stood silently, his head hanging, his eyes staring blankly at the floor.
"Are you Vernon McCrae?"
Deep voice asked more forcibly, threateningly.
And what if I am?
He coughed and blood dribbled down his chin.
"Tell us about the movement."
No answer. I barely caught the command that came from the darkness. Not a word, really, more of a grunt. The stout dark man, who stood slightly behind and to McCrae's left, punched him in the kidney. The prisoner groaned and sank to his knees. The dark men stepped forward, hauled McCrae to his feet, then resumed their positions.
"Just tell us what we want to know and you can go home. It's that easy."
McCrae raised his head slightly and glowered toward the lamp, as if he could clearly see the figures seated in the darkness beyond its glare.
I know who you are.
He croaked, straightening up as best he could.
"Who heads the movement?"
I know your secrets.
There was hatred and defiance in McCrae's voice. Another grunted comment came from the darkness. The stout dark man stepped forward and lashed out at McCrae's head with his arm, striking a fearsome blow with his elbow. There was an audible crack as the man's skull jerked violently to the side. McCrae's dead body hung limp in the air for a moment, then crumpled in a heap on the floor.
"Bloody below,"
said Deep Voice.
"You were to intimidate the man, not execute him."
He was going to die before morning anyway.
Offered a thin, reedy second voice from the darkness.
but this was to be an interrogation first. Find out more about the movement.
What is done is done.
Said deep voice. The lamp went out, plunging the great hall back into darkness. Chairs scraped against the floor, and I could hear movement.
Take care of him.
Said deep voice.
Disappear him?
I think it was one of the dark men.
No. The body will send a message. Make it look like an accident. That will satisfy the citizens. Yet the movement will see it for what it is.
The hall doors opened, and I could barely make out the silhouettes of 3 men exiting the room. The dark men followed, dragging McCrae's body. The door shut. The empty silence belied the violence that had filled the great hall just minutes before. There was a noise across the way from me. Ambrose. I couldn't see him in the darkness, so I didn't even blink until I was sure that he was gone. I couldn't sleep. Who could, after seeing what I had seen? So I sat at my desk, lit a candle, and started to draw. Lots of black, a pool of light, a battered man, a bloody head, a heap on the floor. I'd seen the necks of chickens being snapped and cows being slaughtered, but I'd never seen a dead person before, much less one being killed. I looked at the image of the heap on the floor. I had drawn it in detail, the slack expression on the beaten face, the loose way the arms and legs folded and splayed, the pool of piss in which it lay. Was this heap of skin and bone Vernon McCrae, or just a hunk of dead meat? Was it his con that had made him a man? Had it left his body to return to below, only to rise through the fount of life and be reborn in another person? I was miserably hot, soaked in sweat, and I felt like vomiting. There was a soft rap on the door, and Missy Howard slid in, still dressed in her uniform.
The last carriage just left,
she whispered. I turned toward her, but I said nothing. Tiny beads of perspiration sparkled on her skin like jewels in the candle's flickering light. She smiled.
I assume you made your way down to the hall.
I gathered my drawings, got up, walked to my bed, and spread them out in sequence. I inclined my head to indicate she should have a look. She came and stood beside me. As she followed the line of sketches, her face darkened. Her hand clasped mine. Tears streamed down her cheeks.
What? Why? Who?
They, the dark men, called the man a prisoner. What is that?
Did they say who he was?
They asked him if his name was Vernon McCrae. Do you know him? She shook her head. What's a prisoner?
It's not a word found in the 1900. It's not taught in school. The council knows many words not in the 1900, words that are only used in private.
But what does it mean?
You know what a captive is?
Yes, like a bird in a cage. She nodded.
A prisoner is a captive who is accused of doing something very bad. Someone who is awaiting punishment.
I had never heard of such a thing. If you do something wrong, you are reprimanded, fined, or sanctioned immediately according to the code.
Did he say anything? McCrae, I mean.
Only, I know who you are. I know your secrets. Missy Howard scooped up the drawings, rolled them into a tube, and wagged them at me like a teacher lecturing a troublesome student. But her tone was fearful, pleading.
The dark men, as you call them, can't catch you with drawings like these. Understand? Promise me you won't draw these images again. Ever. Promise? Promise?
She was shaking me by the shoulders. I promise. She put her arms around me, lay her head against my chest, and began to sob. 8th month dragged on. It was the time of cycle, 3 weeks before the faculty and staff came back for the new school term, when I was on my own in the Mount. Headmaster Hunninger had left the morning after the incident. Missy Howard had gone to Primacita to visit family. Ambrose usually stayed to boss me around, but even he was gone. My habits were so ingrained that I still performed my duties according to schedule, and I even did extra work tending to the summer garden. There were 2 major benefits to this time of the cycle. First, I was allowed to eat whatever I wanted because the old food stocks would be replaced by the time the students arrived. Second, I would spend some of the hot, lonely nights soaking in cool water in the luxury of the faculty bath. Of course, the student showers were marginally better than the small stall in the staff's washroom, but the faculty bath was much finer and stocked with a variety of aromatic salts. I had been on my own for 8 days. Sol Major had set and Sol Minor was just rising when I returned to my room after an evening's work in the garden. I was soaked in sweat and covered in grime. A cool bath sounded good, so I shed my dirty clothes and made my way to the faculty bath. I didn't use the passages. There was something liberating about walking the halls of the Mount bare naked. Just as I cracked open the bath door, I heard a splash. Through the narrow opening, I saw Missy Howard step out of the copper clawfoot tub and reach for a towel. My bodily response was immediate and beyond my control. I backed down the hall as quickly and quietly as I could, but I bumped into a console table that sat against the hallway wall, making its contents rattle.
Fallon?
I turned and ran, frightened, embarrassed, and aroused. I ran to the student showers and stood under a cold stream, watching as the garden grime rinsed away, but my arousal didn't. I recalled what the kindly white-haired doctor had told me after my procedure. Being stemmed doesn't mean you don't function anymore, only that you can't reproduce. You'll still get aroused. It's normal. Understand? It's okay to, handle the situation. You know what I mean? In fact, it's encouraged for anyone without a contract. So I handled the situation, dried off, then returned to my room through the passages, slipped on clean sleeping shorts, and crawled into bed. I tossed and turned for an hour before getting up, lighting a candle, and beginning to draw. It was a series of sketches of Missy Howard as she stepped from the tub. My body was reacting again. There was a soft rap on the door, and I heard Missy Howard, draped in a cotton robe, slip into the room.
You all right?
I was overwhelmed with conflicting emotions. Without turning toward her, I took my drawings and tossed them on the bed. I inclined my head, indicating that she could look at them if she wanted. I heard her move closer, pick up the sheets of paper, and shuffle through them.
I returned early,
She said.
I didn't want you to be alone after what you experienced. I saw you in the courtyard and decided to clean up before inviting you to have dinner with me in the kitchen. I didn't mean...
She stood behind me and draped her arm over my shoulder, placing her hand over my heart. She kissed me on the top of my head. She seemed small, delicate.
You've grown into such a lovely young man.
She pulled me up from my chair. When I turned toward her, it was as if I were seeing her for the first time. She had always been larger than life to me, an authority figure with a deep knowledge of the life and politics on New World. Now I towered over her by a full head. She rose up on her toes, wrapped her arms around my neck, and we kissed. She smelled of lavender. She stepped back and slipped the robe from her shoulders, then stood there, unashamed, letting me take in every detail of her body. She came to me, slid her hands down my hips. My shorts fell to the floor.
My given name is Jenna.
She said as she took hold of me and pulled me into bed. She led me, guided me, taught me. It was a wondrous night, as were the days and nights that followed. Of course, I had read the medical books in the Mount's meager library and the Council's Guide to Contract Etiquette. I'd even purloined a copy of Coupling for a Successful Contract, which contained simple yet evocative drawings illustrating various methods to ensure conception. All the literature said coupling was a necessary activity that ensured the survival of New World. However, my reading hadn't prepared me for the host of conflicting feelings that coupling with Jenna had stirred in me. Raw passion, tenderness, the desire to please and to be pleased, and an intimacy I had never imagined. I wanted to spend every minute of every day with her. I dreaded the start of the new term and the thought of her giving anyone else her attention. I feared this feeling of possessiveness because contract etiquette clearly warns about developing attachments. The two parties must honor the end of the contract or early termination if one party withdraws. But that didn't matter to me. Jenna and I were different, special. We weren't coupling to fulfill a contract. Neither were we ensuring the survival of New World. We had formed an emotional bond. The title, Missy, meant Jenna still had her contract. We would be together forever. I would earn my citizenship, and we could contract to have a child. The future seemed so clear. Then Dean Ambrose returned unexpectedly and began giving orders. That night, when Jenna came to my room, I took her into my arms. She put her hands against my chest and pushed us apart.
We can't continue.
Why not?
Everyone will be coming back in a few days, and there's something about Ambrose.
What?
I don't know. Things are about to change.
I took her in my arms again. Yes, they are. I'm about to become a free man. Then we can... She looked saddened.
No, we can't.
I let go and stepped back. She became stern, acting like an adult putting a child in his place. I was overwhelmed with feelings of both shame and anger.
You don't know what's happening,
she said. Jenna got to her knees, reached under my bed, and dragged out my drawing box.
We must get rid of these before anyone else returns.
She lifted the box onto the bed and opened the lid. My drawings?
And your pencils, erasers, all of it.
She swept everything on my desktop into the box, then replaced the lid. Why?
Because I say so. No one can find them in your room.
She took the box and started for the door.
Your talents are too...
To what?
Dangerous.
Dangerous? For whom?
For you, for me, for every living being on New World.
End of chapter 1. Next up, From Here to There.